Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. This evening we've got brand new numbers, striking numbers that have never been seen before, and they may reshape how you think about illegal immigration. So you've heard the same line a million times. It's repeated like a mantra by the left during every debate on the subject. All immigrants are hardworking and law-abiding. They do jobs you wouldn't consider doing, and they do them cheerfully. They sacrifice for their families in ways you probably don't. In fact, and this is always the last point, it's always delivered with the confident satisfaction of someone shutting down a debate with superior data, undocumented immigrants actually commit fewer crimes on average than native-born Americans. Not only are immigrants more virtuous than you are, but they're safer to be around. In other words, stop complaining. They're your superiors. But wait, are we sure that that is true? Are people who are in this country precisely because they were willing to break our immigration laws really less likely to break other kinds of laws? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Yet until today, strangely enough, no one could say for sure whether it was true, because reliable statistics didn't seem to exist. Our government tracks pretty much every trend and every phenomenon you can think of, from how many pounds of pistachio nuts are recalled every year to how many fifth graders are injured on swing sets to how many people die in bathtubs. This is a nation of record keepers. We're overseen by an army of spreadsheet-wielding bureaucrats. Numbers control our lives, except on this subject. Somehow, the government went for years without honestly trying to track the volume of crime committed by illegal immigrants in this country. Maybe they were too incompetent to do it. More likely, they didn't want you to know the answer or to think about it even. In any case, we now for the first time have the actual numbers, and here they are. According to statistics from the U.S. Sentencing Commission, non-citizens are actually far more likely to commit serious crimes than Americans are. Non-citizens account for 22%, more than a fifth, of all federal murder convictions, 18% of fraud convictions, 33% of money laundering convictions, 29% of drug trafficking convictions, and 72% of convictions for drug possession. Meanwhile, the non-citizen percentage of the American population, about 7%. So that is a massively disproportionate amount of crime, not even close. No, immigrants are not more law-abiding and less dangerous than Americans. That's totally untrue. Indeed, it's the opposite of the truth. Non-citizens are more likely to be arrested, convicted, and imprisoned for serious crimes than people who were born here. Much more likely. So why didn't we know this until now? Why have so many people been lying to us about this for so long? That's a question we plan to ask a whole bunch of people. Well, we'll start tonight with Ali Noorani. He is Executive Director of the National Immigration Forum, and he joins us in the studio. Thanks, all, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So this is a conversation I've had, I don't know, a dozen times in the past month on this show, where people say, well, actually, non-citizens are less likely to commit crimes. And they cite some Cato study or something. Now we have definitive numbers on this from the U.S. Sentencing Commission that shows that non-citizens are not just more likely to commit crimes, serious crimes like murder and fraud, drug trafficking, but far more likely to commit those crimes. Why are we just learning this now?
Well, the bigger question, I think, Tucker, is how do we make sure that we are keeping the nation secure in a way that's using our valuable law enforcement resources the best way? Because I'll be the first to tell you that we are a nation of laws, and we're a nation that should be keeping Americans safe.
Right.
So let's make sure that law enforcement are in a position to do their job and get those violent threats, those public safety threats off the streets, particularly if they are immigrants. And the way you do that is that you make sure that the immigrant community can trust local law enforcement. So that's why I'm concerned about the direction of the administration when it comes to immigration enforcement, because they're actually undermining the ability of local law enforcement to do their job. So enforcing,
this is like this weird alchemy where enforcing border laws makes us less safe somehow. But let me ask you, if 22% of all federal murder convictions are of non-citizens, but only 7% of the population is non-citizen, that suggests we're letting in the wrong people.
It suggests that we should be doing a much better job in terms of local law enforcement. And the way to do that is to make sure that the immigrant community is in a position to report crimes. Because at the end of the day, those individuals who are immigrants who are committing those crimes, you know who the most likely victim is? The immigrant.
Well, that's irrelevant. Wait, hold on. So you're saying that, hold on. Let's just pause and let these numbers kind of settle, because these are not been public until today. 22% of all federal murder convictions, non-citizens. 33% of money laundering convictions, non-citizens. 29% drug trafficking. 72% of all convictions for drug possession, non-citizens. Non-citizens are far more likely to commit serious crimes than native-born citizens, and foreign-born citizens, for that matter. Why shouldn't this make us want to radically curtail immigration into the country?
It makes me radically want to make sure, that law enforcement are able to do their job, because again, those crimes are being committed within the immigrant community. So
some are. No, but that's not. I mean, some are, some aren't. Well, hold on. We got these numbers today, so we actually don't really know where these crimes are being committed. We don't know anything about it other than this. Like, this is the first.
No, but if you look at the research shows that the immigrant community is the victim of the disproportionate.
But it doesn't matter.
So then, but what matters?
Why are we letting in people who are many times more likely to commit murder, fraud, drug trafficking than people who are born here? Why don't we think through who we let in? Doesn't it suggest that to you?
It suggests to me that our immigration system is fundamentally broken, and we need to make sure that those individuals who are here, who are undocumented, are registering for legal status, passing a criminal background check, learning English, and coming out of the shadows.
I get that you've got your pre-existing priorities that you want. I understand you do it for a living, okay, and I respect that. But again, for the third time, these are brand new numbers. We didn't know them when we woke up this morning. Now we do. The debate is over. Non-citizens far more likely to commit dangerous crimes than citizens. So, with that in mind, does that shock you?
It shocks me that we haven't been approaching the problem the correct way.
But why have we been saying the opposite with such great authority all these years? Well, actually, according to Cato or some think tank, I mean, can we just pause and say, we were totally wrong about what we've been saying?
The problem here is that we want to get violent criminals off the streets. Is that correct?
We don't want them in here in the first place.
We do not want them.
So why are we making law enforcement deal with these people? Why don't we stop it at the border, and then we don't have to put our police and citizens at risk?
I think that's a great idea. And another way you do that is that you make sure that you have a functioning legal immigration system and a process for people to go through. The only people who are hiding from law enforcement...
Really? I thought, don't we bring in more than 1 million people legally every year?
It's clearly out of whack with our
needs. More than any other country in the world?
We're also a much bigger country than almost any other country.
We're not,
Our workforce is actually much more dynamic and fluid.
Maybe, okay, but leaving the economics of it aside, I mean, that's another show, another debate, but I just want to acknowledge that one of the core operating assumptions that we have had for years, and I've been at the center of this debate, was wrong. Not just wrong, but totally wrong. It was a lie. Does that make you reassess what you thought a little bit?
What I want to try to assess is, how do we actually solve the problem? I mean, we can, if you want to quibble about statistics, you should bring somebody from Cato.
No, but it's not quibbling. It's what we've been claiming is the very opposite of the truth.
I want to focus on solving problems. That problem is individuals who are here who are violent criminals and public safety threats. I want them off the streets, Tucker. The only way you can do that is to make sure that the crimes they commit are being reported by the victims. And if the victim is an immigrant, we need to make sure that they can trust their law enforcement.
But why? Well, clearly someone's reporting these crimes. We don't have a problem with that because, again, we have disproportionately big numbers here. My question is, why do you think non-citizens are committing crimes at a far greater rate than Americans are?
I think we got to make sure that individuals who are coming to the country have been properly vetted. They're going through the processes they need to. And the folks who are here and are undocumented...
So you think they haven't been properly vetted?
And the folks that are here who are undocumented, we need to require they pass a criminal background check. That is our biggest problem right now, because the individual undocumented immigrant who's a violent threat to our public safety, they're the ones hiding...
Why wouldn't we just build a wall? Like, the public kind of wants that. What's the argument against that exactly?
If you actually want to solve a problem at the border, you want to actually focus where the problem is. The majority of drugs, guns, and money are smuggled at ports of entry.
But these are not drugs and guns and money. These are people committing crimes.
Those individuals who are committing those crimes, they're coming in through ports of entry.
But so do you think a wall wouldn't help at all? Because why?
I want to put money where the risk is on the border, where the majority of drugs...
Well, we didn't even know there was this risk until about 2 hours ago. So maybe we should pause and think about these numbers, because they are shocking. You will concede that. Thank you, Ellie. Appreciate it. Mark Stein is an author and a columnist. He joins us tonight. Mark, are you surprised by these numbers?
No, I'm not, because I think it accords with most people's experience of the transformative effect of immigration. And it's logical, too, that when a first world country imports continuously a large, unskilled population into its country illegally, that is an act of law breaking at the conception, and there's no reason why they would then have any other respect for other laws. And to be honest, I mean, I found that last 5 minutes surreal, where your guest's main concern is that certain illegal immigrants are getting crimes committed against them by other illegal immigrants, and they're scared to go to the police. That's not what these statistics show. These statistics, which for political correctness reasons we were prevented from knowing in recent years, show that this country is in effect importing a criminal class, and it does not check any aspect of the criminal class it imports. Now, the few of us who have the misfortune to go through the legal immigration system, I went to see Neil at Homeland Security in Manchester, New Hampshire a couple of years ago, and he asked me about whether I'd committed any crimes, and I said I'd been pulled over by a traffic cop in Montpelier, Vermont, for passing a little old lady at 17 miles an hour, but I got the case dismissed. Neil from Homeland Security in Manchester, New Hampshire, wanted to see proof that the state of Vermont had actually dismissed that complaint against me. So we have a bifurcated system here in which law-abiding people have to dot every I and cross every T, and every single day we import drug gangs, money launderers, murderers, drunk drivers, because the professional lobby group your previous guest represented somehow thinks this is in the interests of the United States. It's not at all.
The rector of my church spent the better part of a year waiting for a visa. He spent 20 years in the British Army. They didn't want any more Scottish Anglicans in this country because they're dangerous. Meanwhile, all of Congress is arguing about how we can keep people who snuck in illegally here, and you're a bigot if you're not for that. So what does this reduce? So, like, the key argument has always been that immigrants are better than we are. I mean, isn't that the argument you hear every day? Like, they commit fewer crimes than you do. They work harder. They're just better people. How dare you complain about them? Now that we know these crime rates are way higher than they are for American native-born, what's their argument now?
Well, Nancy Pelosi has said that we ought to thank the parents of the Dreamers for bringing them here because, as you say, they're better than us. If you listen to people like your previous guest, every single Dreamer is a high school valedictorian just wrapping up his third tour of Afghanistan. They're way better than us. So the only way to get the general depravity rate down in the United States is to import more and more low-skilled immigrants illegally across the Rio Grande. That's the argument Jorge Ramos made. Oh, no, you're much safer being in a town of illegal immigrants than you are in a town whose population got off the Mayflower. And the fact of the matter is this is absolutely the inverse of the truth. The statistics you cited, even taken as a whole, 94% of these non-citizen criminals in federal custody. And by the way, this is just the tip of the iceberg, because 90% of incarceration is at the state and local level. But the proportions show that about 94% of these non-citizen criminals in U.S. federal prison are illegal immigrants. Why does any country need to import a criminal class if that is one of the jobs that Americans will do? Americans are happy to murder and rape and sell drugs to each other. You don't need to import other people to do that.
Yeah. Well, one job that Americans are less interested in is voting Democrat, and these are people who will do that. So that's kind of the point. That's kind of the point of the whole thing. Mark Stein, thank you for joining us.
That's right. Thanks a lot, Tucker. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas. Thank you. Well, it's a scandal that won't die, joined by another that is brand new. New information tonight on the investigations into Uranium One and the Obama administration's soft treatment of the terror group Hezbollah. Stay tuned. The Obama administration has been out of power for almost a year, but we're still finding little Easter eggs of scandal scattered around the front lawn of Washington. At the request of Attorney General Jeff Sessions, DOJ officials are interviewing FBI agents about the Uranium One deal in an attempt to determine if another special counsel is warranted to keep investigating that. Meanwhile, Congress is asking the Department of Justice to turn over all documents and communications related to an alleged multi-year effort under the last administration to basically give some space to Hezbollah to sell drugs internationally, including in this country, in order to make sure the Iran deal went through. Philippe Reims is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. He was a longtime advisor to Hillary Clinton, and he joins us tonight. So, Philippe, both these stories, I don't think it's possible to overstate their significance, but at their core, both of them have important elements. So start with Uranium One. And I'll just concede you're a former Hillary spokesman. I don't think she's necessarily the villain of the story.
Thank you for the concession.
No, I think she is a villain in the story. But the Obama administration allowed Russia, a Russian-controlled company, control over some large percentage of our uranium reserves. Like, that's kind of beyond dispute. Why was that ever a good idea? And why is no one in the press asking a really simple question like, why'd you allow that to happen?
Well, I think they did. And there's a process for that. It's called CFIUS.
Yes, I know.
It's any time that any asset of the United States that has a national security implication is to be sold to a foreign element, it has to go through a very rigorous review. Now, the Secretary of State and the State Department are part of that, but there are 9 departments and ultimately the President. Now, in this case, we can get into the real nitty-gritty of it, but we were not turning over the keys to the uranium kingdom. It passed muster, and we were no less...
The responsibility was diffuse, I'll concede.
But it's not diffuse. It's with 9 different cabinets. 9
different agencies. It's not just one agency. That's the point. But they're all within the same administration. But the macro question remains unanswered, which is the Russian government wound up with control over uranium deposits in Wyoming, in the United States. If you consider Russia our chief strategic rival, then why would you ever allow that? Like, why is that a good idea? I don't understand.
Well, they were buying into a Canadian company.
Correct.
A Canadian company.
Well, we could have stopped it. The Obama people could have stopped it.
We could have, and obviously the people who looked at this, who have nothing at stake other than what's in the best interests of our national security, determined that this did not in any way impede that.
But given that we know that there's never been an adversary more terrifying or dangerous to American democracy than Vladimir Putin, who literally haunts the dreams of 50% of the people in Washington, why haven't
disagreement here.
I'm saying that sarcastically because I don't actually think he's the gravest threat to American national security, but every Democrat thinks that, and yet they allowed him control over our uranium. Why haven't they apologized?
There's nothing to apologize for.
Okay, so how can he simultaneously...
The person who owes an apology writ large is Vladimir Putin to all of us for what he's done to our democracy in the last year.
So he's evil, you say, but simultaneously you say it's okay that the Obama people allowed him control of our uranium.
It's why we have a very rigorous process, whether the president's name is Obama or Trump or Bush or Clinton, to make sure that we are in no way turning over assets that should not be in foreign hands. There's a reason why it's such a rigorous process.
Assets, I think
because it was determined that this Canadian company...
Right, but it was the wrong decision, obviously.
Well, that's...
So why shouldn't the people who made it apologize and say, yes, I imperiled American national security by my lack of wisdom, by my foolishness, my short-sightedness. I didn't understand how dangerous Russia was. I'm part of the problem. I apologize. They do that in Japan. Why aren't they doing it here?
I don't know who that would be. I know that's not me.
The 9 heads of those agencies,
I know it's not
Secretary Clinton.
Well, no, Secretary Clinton didn't roll up her sleeves and get into the, let's look at the uranium.
Her agency signed off on it. She should apologize, no?
No.
No. Okay, no apologies.
No.
All right.
Not on Uranium One.
I kind of sensed you were going to say that.
No, not on Uranium One, no.
Huh. So what about the other question this evening, and that is the Politico piece that pretty much demonstrates that Treasury Department and DEA officials were stymied in their efforts to control Hezbollah's international money laundering and drug dealing operations. These are not partisan right-wingers. These are people who worked for the Obama administration. They're saying our goals were sublimated because of the Iran deal. I don't see why that's not a scandal. It seems like a scandal to me.
Well, I think, first off, most people, including in the Obama administration, didn't know where this came from. When you look at these stories, there are 2 people. They might not be crazy out there, right-wing, whatever you want to call them, but they have been vociferously against the Iran deal from the beginning.
There are dozens of people in
the two primary sources in there, but
the author said there were dozens of people, a lot of them Democrats, all of them Obama employees, who said.
Well, there are four on-the-record sources today in the Washington Post for the CIA, the NSC, the White House, and for the State Department, saying that this didn't happen, that you would never in a million years do anything to impede.
Okay, then there are people who obviously don't, and they may be right.
Let's look into it.
Wait, let's look into it. So
okay,
the allegation is made by Obama staffers, former Obama staffers, that cocaine was sold in this country, narcotics, because the Obama people allowed it to be, because they didn't want to.
I really doubt that.
Deal. All right.
I doubt that.
But you would have no problem with an investigation
I have no problem
to get to the
with
bottom of it.
investigating. I have a problem with what's turning into interference and intimidation. And I think what we're seeing, it's one thing. Right. You have news sources. I have my news sources. We go back at night. We have our separate corners.
This is political.
But we have to share. No, but with something like investigations, we can't fight over the FBI.
Well, I agree, and
that's what's happening now.
They shouldn't be partisan.
But
you know what I mean?
Well, but what's happening, and I think the common ground here is that Comey definitely did a number on the FBI, but they are now caught in some kind of divorced parents tug of war.
I'm being told we have to go, but I agree with you on that. Philippe, thank you. Is she a left-wing activist, or could she be a Russian spy? Congress wants to investigate Jill Stein of the Green Party for possible collusion with Vladimir Putin, believe it or not. She joins us next. Deputy FBI Director, the newly famous Andrew McCabe, testified before the Congress for more than 7 hours yesterday, Tuesday. His testimony was hidden behind closed doors, but now Fox can report that he appeared to contradict himself at least once during his testimony. He also failed to offer support for the infamous Trump dossier. Fox chief national correspondent Ed Henry has details in that story. Hey, Ed.
Well, Tucker, he just wrapped up about another 7, 8 hours of testimony behind closed doors before another committee tonight. Bottom line question is simple, and you got into it a moment ago. At the FBI, which is supposed to be nonpartisan, was there a pro-Clinton bias that led people like Andrew McCabe to let Hillary Clinton off the hook, not just on the email server, but Uranium One as well? And what's interesting is when you look at those two investigations, they were overseen by 3 key FBI figures. James Comey, who's been tweeting a lot lately about truth and justice, McCabe as his deputy, a job he still holds today, and the agent who led the Clinton server investigation, Peter Strzok, who of course sent all of those pro-Clinton text messages. Perhaps the most important texts refer to a meeting in Andrew McCabe's office where FBI officials allegedly discussed an insurance policy in case Donald Trump was elected, hinting at a plan to investigate him. Yet after all of that questioning by the House Intel panel, we still have little clarity on what they meant. And McCabe testified he could not recall when he learned the Clinton camp and the DNC paid for that unverified anti-Trump dossier that was funneled to the FBI in the summer of 2016 and may have been the basis for the Obama administration's surveillance of General Michael Flynn and possibly others. That's led Republicans to charge the material from those wiretaps was used to weaponize the investigation of President-elect Trump that morphed into the special counsel probe. And what you ask could possibly be affecting Andrew McCabe's memory about all this? It turns out his wife ran for state senate in Virginia in 2015. She received several $100,000 in campaign cash from an organization controlled by Virginia's Democratic Governor Terry McAuliffe, who's obviously very, very close to the Clintons. Doesn't prove there was corruption, but this is one of the things that really infuriates people about these investigations, Tucker, which is you've got someone in Andrew McCabe at the center of all of this, and at the center of investigating Hillary Clinton around 2015, 2016. And his wife was receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions.
And he did not recuse himself from the investigation.
Not at all. He was a deputy director.
Running the D.C. office. Shocking. Ed, thank you for that. Well, last year, Jill Stein was carrying the banner of the American left in the presidential election. She was the Green Party candidate. Now she's been exposed. Apparently, despite leading the Green Party, she was a Russian spy all along. That's the claim, believe it or not. 2 Senate committees are investigating her as a possible crony of the Kremlin. Her sins include appearing on RT, that's the Russian television channel Russia Today, and attending a dinner in 2015 where she sat at the same table as Vladimir Putin, all of which makes her a modern Mata Hari. What does she say in her defense? Jill Stein joins us tonight. Dr. Stein, thanks for coming on.
Great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Are you now, or have you ever been, an agent of Russia? Do you speak Russian? How often do you talk to Vladimir Putin?
Like, not at all. Like, even when briefly, he sat at this head table at a conference. I was in Moscow for a conference, attended actually by the BBC, by the Canadian broadcast system, by the state TV networks for China, India, Telesur, etc. This was a actual legitimate conference. It's all up on the web. There's nothing secret about it. We were posting information, putting out press releases, no backroom deals, no secret meetings in oligarchy towers or anything like that. All very transparent and public. The dinner at the end of the conference was really a non-event. At one point, Putin came in with a couple of guys that I assumed were his bodyguards. Turns out they were actually his inner circle, but you would have never known it. Nobody was introduced to anybody. There was no translator. Actually, not a word exchanged. At one point, Putin made a very rapid turn around the table and shook everybody's hand, but without any exchange of names. So that's about as significant as this was.
Well, that sounds like collusion to me. So wait, can we get to your real crime, which was running for president as a third-party candidate? And in the view of a lot of people in Washington, you got Donald Trump elected. Do you see this as punishment for the crime of running for president?
Yes. Yes. I mean, in many ways, many of the articles, like the New York Times 3 days ago in announcing this investigation, began with a quote from a former spokesperson for the Clinton campaign saying that, well, isn't this great because so many Clinton Democrats are furious at me. They're outraged that I dared, in so many words, dared to think that we get to make up our own minds, that our votes don't belong to Hillary Clinton or to anybody else. But I got to say, it's not just Democrats. This is a bipartisan commission that's led by Republicans.
I'm aware.
And yeah, they have it in as well because it's very inconvenient to have an opposition political party that's not taking orders from the same suspects.
Look, if they disagree with what you're saying, and for the record, I disagree with almost everything you say. But if you disagree with what you say, why not argue against it? Why try to pretend that you're an agent of a foreign government? That seems like McCarthyism to me.
You're not the only person to suggest that. I think, this is, let me say, I think there are legitimate aims here in the investigation. I think an interference in our election is much bigger than the Russians, and we have yet to see the proof. I would like to see the evidence of Russian culpability here. When John Kennedy, was facing the Cuban Missile Crisis, he declassified the evidence to show the photographs of the missiles in Cuba. Aren't we owed that as the American public? We didn't get to really see the evidence before the run-up to the Iraq War. We are still paying that price, $5.5 trillion and counting. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me a gazillion times, shame on all of us.
Well, so let me revise what I said.
To see the evidence.
I actually do agree with you on something, and I strongly agree with you on that. Jill Stein, good luck. I hope you get that done, and good luck on the Hill. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
It's time for more racist trees. Apparently they exist out in Palm Springs. A golf course architect tells us whether trees near a golf course can really engage in ethnic oppression. That segment is next. Don't miss it. We're living in an era of unprecedented threats coming from directions no one could have anticipated. Jill Stein, you just saw, now a Russian agent. Here's a new one we told you about last night, racist trees. In Palm Springs, California, city officials are planning to clear-cut a grove of tamarisk trees because they're racist. Locals say they were planted more than 50 years ago to separate a golf course from an African-American neighborhood. Last night we spoke to a local resident about their sinister presence. Here's part of the conversation.
If you've done any research on the tree, you'll know that's one of the nastiest trees around, and it's also been declared an environmental disaster by the federal government.
What?
They grow to be 60
because
feet
it's
tall,
wait, no, slow down. Now, hold on. Hold on. Because that tree is a foreign tree, you're calling it nasty? Okay,
absolutely.
I guess. Question is, could Palm Springs be overreacting at all to the racist trees in its midst? Aptly named Forrest Richardson is a golf course architect. He's consulted on the course in question, actually. Ethan Bierman is a radio show host, and they join us tonight. First to you, Ethan. You've been following this. You're from California. Clearly, this is the definition of structural racism. But I wonder if it couldn't be worse. I mean, these are tamarisk trees. If they were white pine trees, would they be more racist, do you think?
No, the trees themselves aren't racist. It was the actions putting them there in the first place. But also, I think it's really important to note, these trees in particular have been a fire hazard this year. You look at, Fox has done a great job covering like the Thomas fire. Tamarisk trees themselves have been explosive during these fires that have been happening. So not only do we have the aspect of the traditional, the origin of the planting of these trees being to separate the black and people of color community across the street after their homes were demolished, by the way, by the city of Palm Springs under racist conditions. This is one of those times, let's set the record straight. Let's clear out trees that are fire hazard. Let's not waste the water, and let's set things
So everybody
straight.
wins. The trees are not just bigoted, but they're flammable. Forrest, here's my concern. If we take down the racist trees, could the homes behind them be hit by racist golf balls?
Well, I don't know. I would like to think that nothing's racist, especially in today's world.
I would too, but my eyes are open now.
The reality is that I don't know why these trees were planted. I don't think that there's any clear indication of why they were planted. One reason that we plant trees on golf courses, especially on narrow corridors, which this happens to be. This is about 240 feet in width, whereas today we would generally get 350 to almost 400, is to protect adjacent homes and property, whether it be a school or houses. And in my opinion, I think the win-win would be to get everyone on board and say what's good for the homeowners and what's good for the golf course and what's good for the other homeowners.
Sure, but it's 2017. We don't do compromise. I mean, come on now. It's the modern era. But let me just ask you, is there, just to clarify, as a landscape guy, are there other reasons other than simply bigotry that they might have been planted?
I did as much research as I could. When I worked briefly on a study for this golf course, we got a lot of historical data, and I was able to find what we think is an early 1960s image that actually shows that this hedge of tamarisk trees was probably there before many of the houses were built. Not all of them, but the hedge was probably predated many of the homes being built there. So,
but obviously that doesn't mean they're not racist trees. I mean, because sometimes it's not obvious if a tree is racist or not. But Ethan, let me just get, and I sort of buy your point that they're both bigoted and a fire hazard. But I wonder if this isn't a teaching moment, right? A time when we could all learn. Instead of cutting them down, maybe we could make them better trees somehow, prune them. Is that not a possibility?
No, let's get them out of there. Let's get back to some native trees that we have in California.
Seems kind of
that's pure desert.
What do you mean? Wait, slow down. What do you mean? For a guy who's in California, I'm serious. Palm trees are not native. Eucalyptus are not native. Should you expel everything from California that's not native? Okay, so are you a nativist now?
Yeah, when it comes to vegetation, absolutely. Eucalyptus trees have become a real problem with tipping over in the storms.
When you're calling other people bigoted, all right. They weren't originally from California, therefore we have to kill them.
But come on, Tucker, we have a severe water problem in California. We have a lack of leadership in Sacramento. We have a lack of leadership in D.C. when it comes to the water issue in California. And we're diverting water to water trees. Why are we doing this?
I know, I agree.
There's so many layers here.
But Forrest, let me just finally close out. I mean, is it possible that if we cut these down, you don't always know what you've got till it's gone? I mean, if you were to pave it and put in a parking lot, do you think you might regret that?
Well, the trees are serving a purpose, I can tell you that. Now, if they could maybe be replaced by better trees, I think your guest last night mentioned eucalyptus, so it's interesting your guest tonight is saying no eucalyptus, and that's
because
why...
I got to go, but they're foreign trees. We're against foreigners now. Forrest Easton, thank you for that. I think you've cleared up a lot.
Good to be with you.
Merry Christmas,
Thank
Doctor.
you.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas. It's finals week. Who will triumph in the final exam before Christmas? Can Shannon Bream finally be knocked from her perch of victory? That's next. It's Thursday, time for Final Exam. We find out which Fox employees and contributors have been paying attention to their jobs covering the news. This week's contestants, correspondent Griff Jenkins and Fox News at Night host Shannon Bream. Shannon has been a buzzsaw, as you know, in this competition, defeating all 6 opponents she has faced. Here are her opponents from weeks past. Wow, that is just a murderer's row, and she's crushed them all. Perhaps Griff is up to the challenge. Now, to switch things up and to give you a fighting chance, we have put Shannon in a different seat. Thinking maybe it's the seat that's doing it.
And I've been put in the Thunderdome, and Turner is about to come out and feed me
all of my good
wolves.
mojo is on that chair and that buzzer, so...
Our producer, Alex McCaskill, who wrote these questions, said these are particularly tough, so we'll see if he's right. Okay, hands on the buzzer. Here's how it works. I'm going to ask the questions. The first one to buzz in gets to answer. You have to wait until I finish asking the question in order to do that. Each correct answer worth 1 point. If you get it wrong, you lose a point. Best of 5 wins. The winner will be awarded a prize that I'm going to keep secret for the moment. Okay, first up. One of Donald Trump's celebrity arch-enemies possibly facing jail time tonight for bribery. That is because she offered millions of dollars to Republican senators to reject the tax bill. You have to wait till I'm finished. Which celebrity was it? Shannon Bream.
Rosie O'Donnell.
Rosie O'Donnell.
All right.
Tripped by the rules. Well, we'll see if she's right. To the tape. Is it Rosie O'Donnell?
Rosie O'Donnell going off the rails, trying to stop the tax bill. Rosie going on a Twitter tirade, tweeting in part, quote, so how about this? I promised to give $2 million to Senator Susan Collins and $2 million to Senator Jeff Flake if they vote no. Many on Twitter quick to point out those bribes would be illegal. She also told her followers to call 911.
It's like The Hague. We have to follow the rules here.
The rules are rules.
Congratulations.
All right. Well done.
Question 2.
Now the stakes go up. Now the stakes go up.
Yeah, they do.
Marist College is out with its poll of the most annoying words and phrases of 2017. There were a lot in competition. Obviously, the most annoying year in human history. In second place was the phrase fake news. Which annoying word won? Griff Jenkins.
Whatever.
No, which annoying word won? Oh, that's your answer. Whatever. Yes. Okay. To the tape. Is whatever correct?
The most annoying words or phrases. Marist polled people to find out the top 5. Fake news. That's second. It got 23% of the votes. And look at that. Number 1, whatever. That was voted most annoying by 33% of respondents, and it is the most annoying word for 9 years in a row.
Yeah, whatever. She's good. She's good. But don't be fooled by the niceties. She's taken 6. She's slayed 6 worthy competitors.
It's on.
Can't let my guard down.
3, it's 1-1. Apple, the company, is in trouble with its customers after admitting it deliberately does what to its older iPhones? Shannon Bream.
Slows them down.
Slows them down. I don't believe that. Let's see if the tape confirms it.
Apple confirming longtime conspiracy theory, admitting it purposely slows down the performance of its older iPhones after some of the new models are released. The company claiming it does this not to push people to buy the newer models that are more expensive, but instead to keep the older phones from crashing.
I have an old iPhone. I feel like it's slowing me down.
Both. I know. It's slowing me down.
Okay, so
I speak from experience.
Your answer was correct, but I don't believe their explanation. It's really for your benefit that we're making the phone so bad you need to buy a new one.
It's very helpful.
Right,
People mock me with how slow this phone is. I try to Google things, Siri, whatever.
Apple's here to help you, Shannon.
Right, yes.
Next question, multiple choice question. This week, a former Navy pilot revealed on this show, actually, that an object in the sky he saw was, quote, not from Earth. He described this unidentified flying object as being in the shape of candy. Which candy was it shaped like? Was it A, a Tic Tac, B, a candy corn, C, a Skittle, and I'll throw in D, Butterfinger, just for the heck of it. Tic Tac, candy corn, Skittle, Butterfinger.
This is just throwing it out there, because I have no idea, but I like Tic Tacs.
You like Tic Tacs? Okay.
Griff
likes Tic Tacs. Is it a Tic Tac? He came across an aircraft that he says was, quote, not something from Earth. It was shaped like a Tic Tac. It had no wings.
Look at you.
That was just, you got to go all in against a very astute.
Okay, so we've actually been here before. People have been to the precipice of victory over Shannon Bream. And in fact, they're littered on the valley floor, their bodies. Okay, so it's 2-2. Right. This is the decisive question. Are you ready? You feeling good?
No, I'm not. I'm like an old iPhone. You just froze me.
so good. Hands on the buzzer. You ready?
No.
Okay, final question. Disney has unveiled its new robot version of the President of the United States, Donald Trump. It's in the Hall of Presidents exhibit in the Magic Kingdom. There's a problem, though. Many say the robot looks nothing like the president, but like which actor instead? Shannon Bream.
Jon Voight.
Well, that's a weird guess. If you get this right, you win. To the tape.
Some on the internet say it looks like a bloated Jon Voight. Jon Voight's never going to speak to me again.
Oh!
Look at that.
Shannon Bream, ladies and gentlemen. I can't believe it. Okay, so you win. This week we run out of prizes. So this week we have a small bottle of non-alcoholic champagne that we're going to give you.
Oh, I like it. Do I get to, like, spray it?
It tastes a lot like bubbly water, but it's delicious.
If I shake it
it's
up,
from France.
Spray it
yes.
like it's like we won the Super Bowl kind of situation.
Louis, the stage manager, saying no. Graf, Shannon, thank you both very much.
Thank you. Thank you for walking me to the